Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is John Davis, and John is an Army veteran who has helped student veterans while working for the VA. He's also the author of the book Combat to College, where he applies the military mentality as a student veteran to help guide veterans through college. We're going to discuss his transition to civilian life and some of the lessons he learned along the way to help other veterans who are in a similar situation to what he found himself in. So welcome to the show, John. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
I grew up in Iowa. I feel like every veteran kind of has three lives. You have your before military life, you have your military life, and your post military life. And honestly, whoever I was before the military, that person's kind of a stranger to me now. But I grew up in Iowa and I grew up playing sports. And when I was 18, I went to community college because that's what you're supposed to do. And my mother didn't want me to go in the military at the time, especially it was the height of Iraq and Afghanistan. And then eventually, after I failed out of community college, I was like, okay, well, the military is the next stop. So I signed up for the military and served the entire time in the infantry. And I did my last 2 years recruiting before I got out a few years ago. And then I started pursuing education. And that led me to kind of narrowing in on student veterans because the first stop for so many veterans, especially enlisted veterans and, especially combat arms people, is college, and how we do there kind of determines our futures.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going to college is one of those scary things for a lot of veterans as they're getting out of the military because they're going in oftentimes way older than any of their peers in their classes that they're taking. And I know when I was in college, I sort of did things a little bit backwards. I went to college first and then I joined the military. And we had a guy who was a Marine veteran who was in some of our classes, and he was just like this old grumpy guy, and he seemed like he just hated everyone around him and everything about being there. But I mean, he aced all the courses. Like he did a great job as far as all that goes. But he was the stereotypical veteran going through college, just
Uh,
hating the fact that the 18-year-old kids are out partying and drinking while he's trying to figure out how to keep a roof over his head and go to school and all this other stuff that he had going on. So yeah, it's a very difficult time for a lot of veterans as they're transitioning out and trying to figure out what it is that they want to do in the third stage of their life. You broke it out into three different stages, right? So tell us a little bit about your transition out of the military. You said you're an infantryman who wound up going to Harvard, right? If I understand that correct. So there has to be a good story there, I'm pretty sure. By the way, I was an infantryman and I went to Harvard too. It was just for one night though, for a friend's wedding. So I'm sure your stay was a whole lot longer than mine. But yeah, I'd love to hear about your transition and how all that took place.
yeah, I was a lot like your Marine friend. When I started college, I was 29. And I remember my first day, I showed up 15 minutes early for my class, like you're supposed to do, because in the military, if you're not early, then you're late. And I remember sitting there and, waiting and waiting. And finally, I felt like panicking. So I was like, I got to be in the wrong room here. And then finally, the rest of the class comes in with probably half the students coming in late on the very first day, which is just an absolutely unforgivable sin in military culture, coming in late with a coffee cup in your hand on the first day.
Yep.
And I realized then I was in kind of a different world. And at the time, as an infantryman, I couldn't get through a sentence without cursing. I couldn't, I remember calling my backpack an assault pack, and the students were a little nervous, like, oh, what's this guy going to do? And I couldn't really disconnect who I was from my military identity. I was in the military, about 9 years, and it was pretty much all I knew. And by the time veterans start school, like you mentioned, with the Marine guy, you tend to be older, tend to have families, you tend to need to work. And well over 50% of student veterans have some type of service connected disability. And all these things, plus, like you mentioned, you're currently transition. Usually when veterans start school, it's right after they get out of the military. So you're currently transitioning out of the military, which is difficult in and of itself, no matter if you do, 3 years or 30 years, you're moving across the country or even the world, if you're getting out from Germany or somewhere like that, you're kind of re-entering your civilian life, your community, figuring out who you are and starting college. And I think that's why a lot of veterans, don't bother going, or a lot that start don't finish, because it is a lot to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. It is. And for all those reasons that you mentioned, right? You're dealing with people who likely have families. They need to worry about keeping a roof over their head, food on the table, all that kind of stuff that your typical college kid who is 18, 19, whatever years old, they don't need to worry about all of that stuff in most cases. I'm generalizing here. I'm sure there are someone's going to probably reach out and be like, oh, I had to worry about all that shit too. But it's like, not
For the
everyone
most
had,
part.
had to do that, right? You're more worried about, what good parties there are on the weekend and that kind of stuff. Like that's your typical college life. But when you got a veteran going into college right after the service, they have other things that they have to worry about. And so I almost wonder if that helps them focus a little bit more and do better while they're in school. They don't have time for going out and partying and slacking off and doing all this other stuff. They need to focus and get the job done, right?
Yeah, I think it's so easy for veterans to focus on the negative aspects of our military service. It's so easy to kind of point at that and be like, okay, this is why I'm screwed up or whatnot. And what I wanted to do is to help veterans view their military experiences as an advantage in college instead of a disadvantage.
Right.
Because, like you mentioned, I mean, you are isolated. Chances are you're the only veteran in the classroom, and it's difficult transitioning back, but you do have things over the other students. So you know how to be on time, like I mentioned. You have grit, you have real world experience, and you can take those and be successful. Like you mentioned, I dropped out or I failed out of community college before joining the military. And then I ended up with a master's degree from Harvard. Not because I'm that smart, just because I understood, you have to put in your time in school, same way you put in your time in the military. And if you tell me to do something, I'll do it. I'm good at following orders, like a lot of military people are. You tell me to study for the test, I'll study for the test. Not a problem. And education is really that complicated. It's like in the military, right time, right place, right uniform. Keep showing up day after day, and you're gonna be good. A lot of veterans, sometimes you don't know what you're gonna do with your life when you're out of the military, so they don't go to college. But college, like younger people, is kind of a place for self-discovery, and for veterans, it can kind of be a place of rediscovery, because you do have to kind of build your civilian identity when you get out of the military.
Right. And when you're in the military, a lot of times your career path is almost laid out for you. An infantryman, right? You have options somewhere along the line to probably go to airborne or ranger school or, different things like that to help advance your career and move you along the way. And, I'm just picking on infantry because we're both infantry and that's, easy. But, other MOSs have other specialty schools and things like that that they could go to and advance their career that way and pretty clear cut. But when you get out of the military and you're not entirely sure what you want to be when you grow up, if you will, it's kind of hard because, you don't really want to go wasting the next 4 years studying for a degree that you may not end up ever using because you may
Mm.
graduate and be like, this sucks. I don't want to do this job. Like, this isn't what I want to do. So, it's really, like you said, a lot of self discovery and trying to learn who you are and what you want to do with your life.
Yeah, a lot of military people just view college as not being for them. And a lot of that's because, after high school, you have three main options. You have the workforce, you have education, or you have the military. And a lot of people chose the military. So, they feel like going to college is kind of going backwards in life. And I think you hit it on the head when, because military life is actually pretty simple. People think of it as being complicated, but it's really not that hard. You have someone in charge of you, you're in charge of someone else. You kind of have a straight career path. Whereas civilian life is more chaotic. There's way more options. There's way more, places to screw up. The military takes care of you so you can focus on your job. They give you a place to stay. They give you, you have a chow hall. They take care of all little things so you can focus on your job. Whereas civilian life, you have to really balance all of those. There's not those support structures that there are placed in the military. So one of the chapters of my book, which I have here, is called Build Your Armor. It's all about how in the military you have a support system built around you. It's already in place. But in civilian life, you have to put it in yourself. And then you also have to maintain it and all those things.
Yeah, so I mean, the people who are getting into college right after the military, they're not entirely sure what they want to do when they grow up, but it's just a matter of just kind of digging deep and looking into themselves and trying to just figure these things out, right?
Yeah, I think college, what it does, provides like an excellent bridge between the military and civilian worlds. Because when I first got out of the military, I had a few months before I was starting college. And that was really a difficult time for me because I didn't really have anything to do. I was so used to kind of someone telling me what to do. And when nobody kind of appeared to tell me what to do, I kind of just did nothing or just got drunk every day or, chased negative things. And so college does provide that kind of healthy amount of structure where, you have these classes you signed up for. And one of the things I advise veterans to do is treat your education like a military contract. So, this is your new contract type thing to where, okay, you're signing up. Now you're obligated to go to class and do your time and all those things because nobody's going to pound on your door if you don't go to school. Nobody's going to care. Your professors are probably not going to be that bothered if you don't show up. Whereas in the military, I mean, if you're 5 minutes late, you're gonna get a phone call from somebody, especially, in the infantry or something, but that's how it is.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. I mean, you really do have to learn how to look out for yourself. People in the military, like you said, you're going to have your team leader, your squad leader, your whoever, your platoon sergeant, whoever, come knocking down your door if you're not at formation on time, or if you're not wearing the right uniform, they're going to be chewing you out, or if you're not, whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, they're going to be on top of you to make sure. But like you said, a college professor could really care less if,
No.
or couldn't
Yeah.
care less if you showed up to
Eh,
class or not. Like they're going to be there getting paid one way or the other, whether you show up or not. And to them, it doesn't matter, you know?
yeah, and so many veterans kind of just don't view college for them. They don't view it as a place for them. What I want to do is
Right.
to encourage veterans like, no, education and learning is for everyone. And one of the things that got me really interested in education, kind of like in helping veterans get through it, is, there's two classes of people in the military. Across all the branches, it's the exact same. You have officers and you have enlisted people. And officers transition way better out of the military. They get divorced less. They struggle less with addiction, with homelessness. They kill themselves less. And I kind of, started wondering why that was because we have essentially the same military experiences to some extent. We work on the same bases, same ships, eat the same food, have access to the same benefits, but officers traditionally have a college degree. And that leads to them doing far better economically because by the time enlisted people get to college, they already face significant obstacles like we talked about being older, having families, needing to work, or potentially having disabilities. So it makes your education a little more challenging. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good place to start your civilian journey, especially because you have this, tremendous benefit of being able to go to school essentially for free with the GI Bill. With, we knew that the greatest generation kind of fought and got that after World War II for us. And leaving that kind of to the side when like 60% of veterans don't even touch their GI Bill is sort of a tragedy, especially given the fact that, you see civilian people that go hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt just to get a college degree. And a lot of veterans who go for free don't.
Right. And then that just blows my mind sometimes when you see these people going and, like you said, going into hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. They're paying off debt well into their 30s.
Their entire life almost sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes even longer, even longer going into their 40s, even further, trying to pay off this education. And then you see these veterans who are coming out of the military who, like you said, could essentially get it all paid for. They don't have to pay for hardly any of it.
Yeah, you can get
And
paid to go a little bit.
right, exactly. And they just blow it away and they don't take advantage of it. It's kind of a little bit crazy if you think about it, right?
Yeah, now the GI Bill is getting more flexible because, traditional education might not necessarily be for everybody. But I mean, plumbers and electricians make a hell of a lot more money than like teachers do. So
Right.
the GI Bill has these programs where they'll pay for these, tremendous vocational programs for certifications, everything from police academy to scuba school to flight school. So I think we're quick to look at the GI Bills just being for like college to go sit in the classroom. But there are
Yeah.
other uses to the GI Bill that I want to encourage veterans to do, even if traditional education isn't for you. Because even though I wrote a book about how veterans can be successful in education, I realized traditional college path just isn't going to be for everyone and isn't going to be for a lot of veterans, especially because, as veterans, we tend to be more experiential learners. We tend to want to do instead of sit in the classroom. And a lot of veterans kind of get bored with the, passive learning that occurs in a lot of colleges. But you can make your dry bill work for you in something you're passionate about.
That's absolutely true. And I had a guy on the show a couple of years ago. His usage of the GI Bill fell in line with what you're talking about there. He ended up going to become a yoga instructor, and he used the GI Bill to help him go through that whole process of getting certified and everything else that goes into it. I mean, that's something that people don't even think about when you talk GI Bill stuff, right? You don't think about yoga instructor, plumber, electrician, HVAC, repair type thing. No one's thinking about these types of things, but that's all available to you as well. So, really, it doesn't make any sense to go out there and just struggle through life, not having the training or the certifications or whatever it is that you need to do the job that you want when you have this available to you, right?
And now, yeah, and now college, I love to hear people when they use a GI Bill like creatively or get the most of it, or even people that give it to their kids, or because you can give it to your spouse, you can give it to your kids or your stepkids to go to college for free. And I meet so many, I do so much educational stuff. I meet so many veterans who they're paying for their kids' college. Just like you need to, and it's just a bureaucracy of everything that veterans don't like to
Yep.
make the phone calls, to do the emails, to kind of bother people because these benefits that we have are pretty good, but it does take taking advantage of them. And for me, I kind of lucked out because I got into a school where I worked in a work study program, the VA, to help student veterans. So I got to see the student veteran experience up close, not only from my own perspective, but these other student veterans I was helping and guiding through education. So I made a list and, I called it John's College Tips and I printed it and I gave it to incoming student veterans. I put it on the wall in our student veteran room. And eventually those tips morphed into the chapters of my book because it's just kind of common sense, lessons and relatable stories from a veteran to veteran. Like I wanted the book to be kind of words from a friend. Like obviously it's not something that's gonna, get me rich or sell a ton of copies because it's for student veterans, which is kind of a small category of people, but such an important time in your life. That first year when you got out of the military is, I think, just crucial that no matter what you do it well, because momentum really matters, whether you're in life or on the battlefield or in college. And if you start off on a good path, it's more likely to keep it going. But if you start off,
Sure.
a lot of veterans, you go to college and hey, say that doesn't work out and you drop out, that's easy to spiral down. And with your economic health playing so much into your mental health and all those things, you know, make more money and you'll be happier. More money, more problems is not necessarily true. I promise you, you'll be happier with more money.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about your book. I don't want to give everything away in the book. Obviously, I want people to go buy the book. I know you're saying it's not going to make you rich, but still you want people to buy the
Yeah.
book. Let's talk about some of the topics and the categories that you kind of broke out for those people that you kind of printed out and started out the outline of the book with this in mind. What are some of the keys to success for student veterans?
So for student veterans, one of the things that you really have to kind of tap into is your discipline. So there's a lot of things that you should maybe leave in the military. Some of the cursing, some of the dark humor, some of the stuff like that is not great. But one of the things that, in my college, a lot of veterans struggled with is dealing with professors, especially professors who were like extremely political in the classroom or placing their own beliefs over the education. And that is a big problem for veterans. I know when I was in school, you had, sort of I don't want to say a anti-military, but to some extent it kind of felt like that and that kind of anti-military stuff or can kind of feel anti-veteran at times. And so it's pretty common to feel uncomfortable in some of these classrooms as student veterans. So a lot of the concepts are pretty straightforward, but it's relatable, it's useful, and it's entertaining. I wanted to, make it all of those things to really connect with people who I understand.
Sure. Yeah, and I think uh, connecting with those people will help in those environments where maybe you're not feeling the warm and fuzzy feeling that you might be used to, with everyone thanking you for your service when you have an anti-military attitude going around campus or something like that. Connecting with maybe a student veteran organization or something along those lines could be useful to at least find other people with similar backgrounds and experiences, right?
Yeah, one of the things that because you can go to college and sit in the back of your classroom and get the degree, and you might not really get anywhere. So it's about maximizing your time in college because, I mean, networking is kind of the way of the future in the military. What you know really matters. On the civilian side, who you know matters, a hell of a lot more. And college is an excellent place to make connections of, not just your fellow students, but it's an excellent place of learning, guest speakers, career services. You have internships, you have study abroad programs, you have all these clubs and organizations that veterans can join. A lot of times we tend to kind of stick in our isolated veteran bubbles. We might be with the student veteran group, but we're less likely to join, the STEM club or those things. But that's how we get forward. So one of the things that my book does is you have to learn how to be kind of a person again after the military. I had to kind of learn how to be, a normal person. I remember like my first group project that I did, I was in a group of 4 people trying to, do this presentation in front of the class. And one of the kids, this dude in the group just was not doing his part and we had to go. And then so I yelled at him. And before you know it, I'm in the security office for threatening other students. And I was like, this guy's messing with my grade. I'm here and he's refusing to do it. And so veterans there's a communication gap sometimes between us and civilians. I was still on military time, phonetic alphabet, things like that. And that can be tough to break. So college is a good time to kind of figure out how to be a person again.
Yeah. And I absolutely hated group projects because of the exact thing that you just talked about. I mean, it was awful because your grade is tied into the effort of other people, and sometimes other people just suck. And
Yeah.
this is my attitude about it before I joined the military. I think people just suck sometimes, and they just are willing to sit there and let everyone else do the work and whatever. But that is also a good reflection on life too. You're going to get into the workforce, and there's going to be those people who just they slack off and they want to ride on everyone else's coattails and just not really do the work or put in the effort that is necessary. And you're going to have to deal with those people. So yeah, maybe jacking the guy up against the wall and, screaming with knife hands pointed at his face
Tell them to
probably
quick
isn't the best. Yeah, tell him to do push-ups and, go low crawl across the quad or whatever. Probably not the best way to handle the situation, but, um, yeah, I mean, you gotta learn how to deal with that too. I mean, in the military, there was a way that you dealt with it, and it was fine. And yeah, sometimes it was not the most polite, way of doing things, but it got the job done. And
Yeah.
when that was your background, that's your training, you're kind of used to that. So yeah, you have to figure out how to be a person all over again. And
Yeah,
uh,
it's all
I,
kind of hierarchically in the military. The relationships are kind of, they make sense. And civilian world is a little crazy when it comes to those things. And veterans kind of have to figure out their place because nobody knows where they belong in the civilian world. Everybody's special, everybody's unique. And in the military, you know exactly where you belong. I mean, it's not a
yeah,
confusing thing.
yeah, no, nobody's special. And
No, nobody's
it's
special.
nobody at all.
Yeah,
Um,
the Full Metal Jacket. We're all equally worthless.
yeah, exactly. And that's, I don't know, it's hard to break that mindset when you get out into the civilian world, but you do have to learn how to be a person and integrate with those people who may not be pulling their weight. And you're going to have to figure out how to deal with those people, this thing. But
There's people in the military that obviously aren't your first choice. I mean, you have to learn how to serve with difficult people. I mean, there's not anyone that didn't, serve for a toxic leader or have those people around them. But one of the things in the outside world, especially in something like education, is you can kind of build your own team. You don't get to choose who you serve with in the military. But a civilian side, you can kind of build your own success team, your own challenge network, and your environment really matters. And, the military in a military environment. But in a civilian world, you get to create your own environment. You get to choose who you're around. If kind of like, plant can only grow in the correct circumstances. So one of the chapters in my book is learn how to say no, because when you're in the military, you cannot say no. I mean, it's Roger that. It's yes, sir. It's yes, sergeant. But in the civilian side, you get the power of no, to say no, even hell no. And sometimes a lot of the people around us are the ones holding us back. So my book does cover how to be like, listen, you have to be selfish at times in your life. You spent all these years, all this blood, sweat, sacrifice for the military, and now your job is to serve yourself, to lead yourself. A lot of veterans, they kind of get used to that service mentality. They're taking care of their families, take care of everyone else, and that makes it harder to take care of yourself sometimes.
No, it does. Yeah. When you're worried, or not worried so much, but when your mindset is always on the selfless service
On the mission.
type of thing, on the mission, on the team, on the whatever, it's hard to break out of that and be a little selfish and take care of yourself and put yourself first and not worry so much about other people. And not that you want to necessarily roll over all those other people and totally, ruin their careers, ruin their lives or anything like that. But you also want to take care of yourself and make sure that you're not getting steamrolled either, you know?
Yeah, we're so used to kind of a communal identity in the military, whereas civilian world, especially now with technology, it's like it's such an individual world we live in. So, hyper individual. And what I want veterans to do is take your communal mentality in the civilian world and build your own team around yourself. Kind of build your own team to be successful as opposed to, going through the world isolated because there's such a big gap. It's only growing between the military and civilian populations. And for a lot of, if you're a veteran in college, you're going to be the only veteran that a lot of those people know. I was surprised when I, went to school and, those people never met another veteran before, that's basically all I knew. But now we have, 80% of the military comes from military families and the same 1%, serve and multiple deployments. And we've kind of drifted further away from our civilian population, which I don't know how it happened, fighting wars for 20 years. But, you know, college is a good place to figure out who you are and tell your story as a veteran because, our stories kind of humanize us. They look at us as, just different, but we're not.
Right. I want to take a slight detour from this conversation right here and talk about something that I found on your website. It was one of the blog posts that you had written. And that blog post talks about what you call tattoo therapy.
Yeah.
And so on this podcast, we talk about all sorts of different forms of therapies. There's a traditional talk therapy that everyone's kind of familiar with. You see it on TV all the time,
Mm.
but we talk about other things, art therapy, music therapy, using horses and other animals and alternative forms of therapies that people don't necessarily think about. And you started writing about tattoos as a form of therapy, and it intrigued me. I don't have any tattoos myself, and I'm probably a rarity in the veteran.
You are.
I
Yeah.
also hate needles, so that just kind of makes sense. But I never really thought of tattoos as being a form of therapy. So could you talk about that a little bit and kind of what you meant by all of that?
Yeah, the military and tattoos obviously are pretty closely connected. If you look at any military formation, I promise you there is a wide array of tattoos underneath the uniforms. The first, tattoos for military reasons were actually in Japanese culture. Samurai used to tattoo the village they're from on their bodies. So if they died in combat, they would be sent back to their village for proper burial and all that. And for me, a tattoo is kind of a transformation. So a lot of military veterans, when they get out of the military unit, they get that unit tattoo on themselves, and it kind of symbolizes a closure or remembering. And a lot of us like to get the kind of RIP tattoos for the people that we served with who are no longer with us, and kind of remember the places you've been, the people you've met there. I mean, it's one of the cool things about the military is you do get to go to a lot of different places, meet a lot of different cultures. And I think that, the military transforms you, it doesn't matter how long you serve. And the tattoos are also a form of transformation.
Yeah, they are absolutely. And I think that closure that you talked about, kind of maybe the RIP kind of tattoos
Mhm.
or those types of things are certainly things that I can wrap my head around that. I can understand why people would want to do that. My brother actually had a tattoo on his arm of a face of a woman. And when he was in Iraq, he was an infantryman as well. When he was in Iraq, there was a woman who came running out and stopped their patrol. And she told them that if they continue going down this one street, they were all going to die. And there was IEDs and all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff like that. There was an ambush set up basically. They were going to die if they went down that way. And so they're like, okay, cool. So we're not going down that way today. Like that's
Right.
just not the best way to go. So they went a different way. And they came back like, I don't know, a couple days later to thank the woman because they found out that what she was saying was actually true. And they did discover like kind of where all of that was set up, where that ambush was set up. And came to find the woman and her family were all beheaded in their house.
Oh, wow.
And so he was like shit. She literally put her life on the line trying to help us. And so he had a tattoo of her face, like the best of his ability to remember her face, tattooed on his arm as kind of like a tribute or a remembrance kind of thing. And, that's just, I think, one way of finding that closure that some people might be looking for. And that's really what kind of piqued my interest with that story that you were talking about, how you use getting tattoos as a form of therapy. And it kind of resonated in terms of like how people would do that and why they might want to do that. And so, I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about that just because we talk about so many different forms of therapy on this podcast. And that was certainly a unique one that I had not come across before. So I wanted to definitely at least bring that up and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I wish I'd have known that story before I wrote the article. I could have included included that story in it. That's one of the best tattoo stories I've heard. I got a lot of like white
Yeah.
trash tattoos all over me from people's garage things, but it's still good. I have military units tattooed on me too, but that is a great story. And I think now veterans are more open to the kind of non-traditional forms of therapy because, the reality we've seen in the veteran community is traditional therapy isn't really as helpful all the time as we want it to be. One of the things that I work on is some veterans to nature for a form of therapy because I really feel like nature
Right.
is one of those things that puts you in the present and has such a healing component to it. And I think that, as society, as veterans, we live our military careers kind of outside. And then when we get out, we spend, we join America, which spends like 90% of its time indoors. And so I think that if we, veterans need to keep getting field time in, keep getting outside, keep being active, keep the sun on your face. And that's, a good form of therapy as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it could be as simple as just going out for a walk outside,
Mhm.
around your neighborhood, going down, exploring new areas, around where you live. I mean, just go and do that. Get outside, keep yourself moving. I think that's the key part of it because movement has its own therapeutic benefits. And, it doesn't have to be super strenuous. You don't have to be going out doing PT like you did when you were 20.
No.
You can go out and do just a walk around the neighborhood and
Yeah. The military can kind of
feel
ruin
comfortable.
working out for us because they make us do these uncomfortable exercises at, 5 in the morning and it's always raining. I don't know why it rains so much more on military bases than the rest of the world. But yeah, I was on a panel yesterday with a Medal of Honor winner, General Fogel, who fought in Vietnam. And all he would talk about to other people is he talked a lot about horse therapy because he worked in some horse units. And hearing him talk about how he had seen so many veterans even before it was becoming, now the horse therapy and things like that are more in the mainstream. But he talked about it, back doing it after Vietnam, introducing veterans to
Mhm.
horses and things like that. So those things have always kind of been there. And, there is some negative aspects about traditional therapy and the big money involved in it, things like that. I think every veteran kind of has a complicated relationship with the VA. Sometimes we want to hate it. Sometimes we want to fundraise for it. I'm not so sure how I feel most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the VA, they're a government organization like any other, and they have their problems, and they have a lot of great people working for them, trying to do the right thing. They can only
Right.
do so much because of the nature of the organization and all that. But, honestly, I think, take advantage of what the VA has to offer. May not be the best fit for you. Try it out. It's like college, it may not be the right fit for you.
Mhm.
Maybe a trade school or something like that might be a better fit for you, but give it a try. If it doesn't work out, try something else. But I think the key message is just keep trying. Like, don't give up because there's so many things out there, so many people who want to help you with no matter what it is. It could be therapy, it could be educational resources, like stuff that we're talking about today, and I think when you quit on whatever it is, whatever your goal is, that's just like going against everything that you learned in the military.
Yeah. And that's what
Keep pushing.
the cool thing about the military is you always have a mission, you always have a challenge. And then when you get out of the military, those challenges and obstacles that the military puts in front of you kind of disappear. And you have to find your own. So one of the first missions you have to do is find yourself, a new life mission, a new goal. And education to me was a good starting point to steer veterans towards. But your challenges don't necessarily have to be educational based. Obviously, you can go do a marathon, go ask for promotion, go do things that make you uncomfortable, because that's the only way you're going to grow is through discomfort. And I think that veterans are kind of over being uncomfortable sometimes after the military. They got been, but to me, one of the things that, bothers me about the veteran community sometimes is we tend to view our best years as behind us. And that could be kind of a defeatist way to live. I've met like 22-year-olds who think their glory days are all in the past. And, you can't live like that when you have the military. So you have to keep a challenge, ahead of you and don't only live in the past or keep looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, especially when you're that young and you have potentially another, 70 some odd years ahead of you. Oh, like, that's a shitty way to look at life. I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can get a copy of your book and anything else that you have to talk about.
Yeah, so my website is www.johnhdaviswriter.com. And there I have my book, Combat to College, which is right here. And I also wrote a student veteran semester journal, which is like a companion to it. So the semester journal is, I think it's like $8, and it takes you through a 16-week semester. So it's like, here's your weekly schedule, here's your to-do list, here's your daily task or weekly task, all kind of geared, towards the student veteran experience. I also have a student veteran coaching program on there that a lot of student veteran programs around the country use for student veterans to help student veterans. And then my blog, and, I'm constantly out trying to help veterans get through their education. Because I think this, once we see more veterans effectively going to school, using the GI Bill and graduating, we'll start to see an improvement in the veteran community. Because like I mentioned, people with college degrees kill themselves less than those without them. So if you can encourage veterans to go to school, I think that's a good starting point in our civilian lives. But like we talked about, I don't think college is the right fit for everyone. I'm not saying everyone in the world go to school, but as long as you're doing something to challenge you, as long as you're moving forward, then you're going to be good. And I think that we tend to view learning sometimes as behind us after we finish our education or after we get out of the military. The military stops sending you to schools, go to schools yourself. So, lifelong learning is for everyone. That's why I think it's great. Like what you're doing the podcast, because you talk to different people, you learn different things, not only yourself, but then your audience gets to hear all these different stories from people who are out in the world doing stuff. So now, self-education is really sometimes better than formal education. I mean, I learned a lot more in Afghanistan than I did in Harvard. So I would say for everyone, if you want to check out some of my writings and my websites, you want to contact me, you can go on there and then I'll take you to my social media stuff as well.
Excellent. Yeah. And I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. So anyone who wants to check that out and get a copy of those books, definitely check out the show notes and there'll be nice, easy links there. But just to echo what you're saying, my degree when I went to school was in accounting. I worked in accounting for a few years after I got out of school, ended up teaching myself software development and website design and things like that. And I made a whole career out of that stuff. Doing that type of thing had nothing to do with accounting or anything that my degree was in. So that self-taught, mindset that you're just talking about is totally something that people do and can be successful with. So, find something that you're interested and passionate about and go after it. It doesn't matter if you have a formalized degree necessarily. I mean, in some cases you might need that for certain legal reasons or whatever. You're not going to be a lawyer without a law degree, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't get a good job or start your own career, your own business or anything like that without something like that. So figure out what it is that you want to do. I think that's first and foremost, and map out the steps that you need to take in order to get there. That may include college, it may not, and figure it out. So awesome. So John, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really do appreciate it. Again, links will be in the show notes for anyone who is listening who wants to check out the books and find out more about John and everything that he's up to. So thanks again, John.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.